Hi, and welcome to 40K 101. Today we will be covering tactics, general tactics. I won't get into any army-specific tactics, mainly because I haven't played every army in 40K. I've only played a few of them, and most of them were Space Marines. We will be posting this to the Rogue Market forums if they ever get the site back up and running. Don't know when that'll be, but I gotta talk to the guy. Anyway, today we are covering tactics. The first thing I want to cover is the HQ section. Now, I've seen some mistakes made tactically with HQs. Mostly that they are infantry units. They are solo models generally. They're solo infantry models, and they are often left to fend for themselves. This is a bad idea, okay? When you run up against an experienced player, they are going to snipe that VP out from under you faster than you can say Bob's your uncle. HQs belong in squads. Now, some HQs are squads, and when HQs are squads, you're good to go. You don't need to create a squad because it's already in one. But when HQs are not squads, you need to put them in squads. A lot of Space Marine players, notably most the Space Wolf players, have been exploiting this new Lookout Sir rule and the new shooting mechanic by putting a Terminator armored Wolf Guard, which is an independent character, into a unit of Grey Hunters and marching them across the board with a Terminator out in front soaking up all the hits, filtering all of the shooting armor saves through a 2+ with Lookout Sir to keep the Terminator alive if he fails any rolls. This results in relatively low casualties for the Space Wolves and a lot of frustration on the part of players playing the Space Wolves because they just can't get those Grey Hunters off the field because everything is filtering through a 2+ armor save. It may not always be wise to have your HQ stuck out in front soaking up all the damage. If his armor's not great, then you want to put him in the back of the pack and use the rest of the squad as a blade of armor to try to get him into position to tear things up in assault, which more than likely he will. And you do want to match these with like units. Except in the case of the Space Wolves, if you have an independent character for Space Marines in Terminator armor, you want to try to group him with other Terminators. Because then he can deep strike with the Terminators using the deep strike rules for Terminators. If your HQ is not armored very well, like the Orc player HQ we had last week, then you want to put him in the back of a boys pack and use all 30 boys as wounds for your HQ to get him into close combat. So keep that in mind. If you're able to put your HQ in a transport, then you want to put him in a transport. Always a safe bet to put an HQ in a transport. Now let's talk about troops. Troops are your scoring units in objective-based matches. What that means is that if your troops hold an objective uncontested, you score victory points based on the scenario. For different scenarios, different objectives have different point values. Only troops can score points this way. There may be a few exceptions in codexes where it says this unit can hold objectives. I'm not aware of any offhand, but typically speaking, if you're going to hold an objective, the only way you're going to do it is with your troops. Now, when you're setting your troops up on the board, you want to keep their purpose in mind. Remember the last time we talked about purposing units? Anybody? Okay. So, you've done a good job in purposing your unit when you built the list. Now, you want to take that anti-infantry unit and not run it headlong at a tank. You are not going to win that fight. You are going to do nothing to the tank, and your opponent is going to laugh at you and point. Just saying. Anyway, so take that anti-infantry unit and go mow down some infantry. Or take that anti-tank unit and run that headlong at the tank, and then watch your opponent not laugh. Because it won't be very funny for him. He's going to lose the tank. Elites and heavy support. I grouped these units together because these units deliver a high body count. I call these units the breadwinners. And the reason why I call them the breadwinners is because in a victory points match, most of your victory points are going to come from the selections you made in elites and heavy support. It's just the nature of the beast. Elites and heavy support, you always want to bring in pairs, because once you start scoring victory points with a unit, your opponent is going to focus fire on them and do everything in their power to kill them. And if you only have one unit, then you won't be able to score victory points as effectively with them gone. Whereas if you bring two such units, then you force your opponent into some target prioritization, and if he makes the wrong move in target prioritization, you can really make him pay for it. So bring them in pairs. And remember that these are role specific. They will do one job, they will do it very well, they will only be good at one job. Unless they're Stern Guard veterans. And then they can do it all. That's about all I want to say about elites and heavy support. Fast attack. I grouped these separately because, well, these don't deliver quite the high body count, but they are still useful. They're good at contesting objectives. Remember that an opponent has to control an objective with no enemy units within 3 inches to score the victory points for that objective. And fast attack units are very good at getting in behind enemy lines and contesting objectives, whether they do it via deep strike or a flanking maneuver. Now, most of your deep striking units are going to come out of your fast attack choices. Not many of them are going to come from your elites and heavy support, but they do exist. So keep that in mind. Most notably, the butt angels, or the, as everyone else calls them, blood angels. I like to call them the butt angels, because they're gay, they're vampires. Hey! We're here for battle, boys! Anyway. They are the Twilight Army, and we all hate Twilight. Put that aside, they can deep strike land raiders. So there's an example of a heavy support choice that can be deep struck. Dark Eldar Scourges, also deep strike. And they carry heavy weapons. I don't remember if they're listed under fast attack or heavy support.
Fast attack.
Oh, they're actually listed as fast attack? Well, there you go. They're fast attack to deep strike. But they do carry heavy weapons. So it's almost like having a heavy support choice deep strike. Almost. Anyway. I remember last time I talked about also bringing these in pairs, deep striking in pairs. Because if you only deep strike with one unit, then it's going to come down, your opponent's going to focus all their fire on it until it's dead, and you will have just given up possibly the easiest victory point of the match. Now, deep striking units are prone to mishapping. That's the other reason why you bring them in pairs. Because they might both come down the same turn, but they might not both make it into combat. We found out last week, as a matter of fact, when I brought squad of Vanguard veterans and an assault squadron on the same turn, then mishaps happen. And I gave up the victory point because my assault squad mishapped onto our own guys. It happens. It happens to everybody. You will mishap at some point. I don't care how lucky you think you are. With deep striking, you will mishap at some point.
I did it in my first game ever.
Yeah, this guy did in his first game ever against me. He deep struck his Terminators and they mishapped.
Happened to me too.
I don't remember what happened to them.
I think they went off the edge of the board.
Mine got overrun by orcs.
Yours got overrun by orcs.
They landed on one of your units.
Oh, but I don't remember what the result of the mishap table was.
Destroyed.
Oh, was it? Okay. It can happen. A lot more often than people think. That pretty much covers all of the unit-specific tactics. Now I want to talk about some more general tactics. We've been playing a series of games between Xenos and Imperium. And we had one tie. In all of the rest of the games, the Imperium has won.
It's been horribly lopsided.
And it's been quite lopsided. And the reason for this lopsidedness is that the Xenos fire has been less than focused. They shoot all kinds of different targets. Nobody's coordinating with anybody else. As a result, casualties to the Imperium side have been fairly light, whereas the Imperium fire has all been focused into a single target until it's destroyed.
Usually the orcs.
Usually the orcs. And thus scoring more victory points and dealing more casualties to the Xenos side. So remember, if you pick a target, to focus all of your target appropriate resources onto that target and shoot it until it dies. Basically. Another thing, transports. We've actually seen two sides of the transport coin in our matches. We have the Xenos transports, which are light and fast, and meant to get troops into close proximity with the enemy in a very short order. And the Imperium transports, which are a little bit heavier and move a little bit slower. There are basically two purposes of the transport. The first purpose, especially if you're light and fast, is to get as close to the enemy as quickly as possible, unload your payload, and then fly around and make lovey fun stuff happen. In case of Dark Eldar Raiders, that's blowing up tanks. On the other hand, there are some transports that are designed to be used more like a mobile bunker, which troops then fire out of. Prime example of this being the Imperial Chimera. Which slowly rolls its way across the board, leaving a path of death and destruction right through the enemy. Especially if you've equipped it like a party wagon, where you've got 3 guys with special weapons firing out the back hatch, laying waste to anything in their path. Most notably, this is done with plasma guns. But it can be done with melta guns and flamers as well. You just have to have the right situation. But generally I recommend plasma because it's multi-purpose. Remember that if you have a light and fast transport, and its purpose is to get the troops in to close combat range as quickly as possible, it is expendable. Completely. That's why you spam them. 2 raiders? Well, 2 raiders I can probably bring down in a turn. At least 1. I can get 1. 7 raiders? But you're getting some units into close combat if you do that. That's about pretty much all I wanted to talk about tactics. While we have some time, I also want to talk about expectations. Now, this is why I want a whiteboard, because I think it would help cement the numbers game for you guys a little bit better. But let's say you're shooting. You're shooting with ballistic skill 3 models. You have a strength 4 weapon. Or, well, you know what? Most armies are strength or toughness 3. So say you have a strength 3 weapon. And you shoot at a toughness 3 trooper. Statistically speaking, half of your shots are going to hit. Statistically speaking, half of those are going to wound. So if you fire 9 shots, 4 or 5 of them are going to land. And of those 4 or 5, 2 to 3 of those are going to wound. And then the enemy gets their armor saves. Unless you AP them, at which point they don't get an armor save. This happens sometimes. In close combat, same thing. If you are a weapon skill, well, if you are an equal weapon skill to your opponent, doesn't matter what the weapon skill is, if you are an equal or close to equal weapon skill to your opponent, you will hit with half of your attacks. And if your strength is equal to their toughness, you will wound with half of your wounds. The point that I am trying to make is the more attacks you can put on the field, the more wounds you are going to yield as a result, regardless of armor saves. If you shoot 87 shots at a squad of 5 Terminators, you are probably going to bring 2 or 3 of them down. Even if you're shooting las guns with AP of dash. If you shoot 150 shots with ballistic skill 2 conscripts into a unit of 5 Terminators, you are probably going to kill them. Even with your ballistic skill 2 conscripts, you have a 1 in 3 chance of hitting and a 1 in 3 chance of wounding on 150 shots. Go. So that means 75 of them, 50 of them will land. 25 of those, no.
13? 12 or 13?
No. A third?
1 in 3.
1 in 3. A third is more than 13.
Not 50?
13 is half of 25.
Oh, right. 20. 17. 17
So 17 of those shots will wound. That's 5 guys making 17 armor saves on a 2+. If you don't kill off the unit, they are going to be decimated.
17 on 2+. 2/3.
Even if you save 2/3 of them, that's still
about 6.
That's still 6 wounds that get through. And if there are only 5 Terminators, that's a dead bunch of Terminators. And you just did it with the crappiest troops, the crappiest gun in the game. All because you poured enough shots into it.
More DACA is always good.
More DACA is always good. So, when you have a unit with ballistic skill 3 and 9 shots, don't expect that you're going to hit with all 9 shots and wound with all 9 shots and expect to flatten whatever you're going to hit. You're not gonna. And don't get butthurt about it when it happens either. Sometimes you will roll miserably. And you will roll below average. Don't get butthurt when that happens, because there will come a day when you will have a game where you are rolling totally and completely above average. And there will be nothing your opponent can do to stop you. I've seen this happen. if you're rolling above average, even with poor tactics, you can still tie a game against a superior opponent. Oh yeah, poor sportsmanship. Don't get butthurt about games. That's pretty much all I want to say. And don't don't break out into river dance when you win either. That's all I'm going to say on that subject. The point of this game is for everybody to have fun. You win some, you lose some. Hopefully you win more than you lose. And you can go out to the bar and have a drink when you're done. So that about ends it for Warhammer 40k 101 and the tactics session. We'll see you in 3 weeks with an errata session. Oh, I'm going to open it up for questions.
It seems like sometimes it's a good idea to actually have less but more powerful weapons than the massive numbers. Like massive numbers, they're awesome if you're going to be mostly stationary, but it's really hard to truck them around.
This is true. There is something to be said for quality over quantity. But remember that 40k is a numbers game. And more shots is always better. Unless you're trying to take down a tank, obviously there are certain strength requirements you need to meet to bring down a tank. But also keep in mind this is infantry. This is an infantry-based game. Infantry is what's going to win or lose it for you, not any. Yeah.
Nah, I got everything I needed.
Okay, I guess that ends it for us. See you in 3 weeks.